Hey, everyone, I'm here, kind of in the corner on the bottom. Um, so this week, week 12, we have a couple of topics. But our first topic is going to be interpersonal stress. So this is all about navigating conflict and differences in relationships, which I think is probably very valuable and important to each of us as human beings because we live in relationship with other human beings, whether they be in our personal lives, in our professional lives, just at the grocery store. So we're kind of constantly in relationship in one way or another. And so figuring out how to navigate those relationships, I think, is a very valuable course of action. And because the class is about stress, we know that, our relationships are one of the key factors that can bring us the greatest of joy and cause the greatest of stress. And we don't need to go through what that means to be stressed out chronically. We've done that all semester so far. So let's just begin looking at what happens, how we navigate the stress of relationships in order to manage the amount of cortisol and the chronic systems that might end up engaged if we don't. Because this is what we go home to. This is what lives in our heads all the time, is what's going on in our relationships and who we are inside of those relationships and what we're saying or doing and what other people are saying and doing. And that can cause, if we ruminate, often what we're ruminating about are our relationships or ourselves inside of those relationships. So anyway, that is what we're going to be talking about. So let's just take a look what we got. Well, maybe if I can get it to work. All right, so first, interpersonal conflict. And conflict is a tough one. Some people seem to be great in managing it. It tends to be something that a lot of people are like, I don't like conflict, I don't manage it well, or others are like, I'm gonna get in there and, fight for what's right for me and so forth. So, let's talk about that. So this slide is about how high drama weakens relationships. And high drama is just a way of dealing with conflict. So high drama raises tensions and it tends to create distance. And when we create distance, then it's really hard to create reparation and, to repair the things between us, the more distant there is. So what is it that creates distance between people? Well, differences can, and I think that, that's not to say that we can't be in relationship with people who are different from us, but it is a good thing to understand that studies do show we are more attracted to those who are similar, at least in mindset, in belief systems, and ideas, and that extreme differences in beliefs, attitudes, and worldview can create diverging goals and needs, things that we think are important, things that we value in life, and then we base our needs and our wants on those values. And if we have very different values, then it's going to become a point of contention in a relationship, and it can lead to us sacrificing needs and interests, trying to change the other, kind of fighting to shape that person into what we want them to be, or withdrawing as we try to adapt to what is. And that can cause tension. We can think of like the introvert extrovert example, which is tough because I do know lots and lots of relationships that have one introvert and one extrovert. And not to say that they can't work. Um, my husband is more extroverted than I am. And so, I think it's just what do you do with this? But I think it's a very easy one to also use as an example of how it can happen. So if you have one person who's really introverted and likes to stay home, doesn't really like to go out and socialize a whole lot, or gets very tired at parties and doesn't want to stay long, isn't comfortable talking with people, and you have one person who just wants to go out all the time and be with people and kind of gains energy from doing those things. How do you manage that particular situation? It can create distance if each person just kind of holds their ground of what they want. So one person goes out and does what they want to do, the introvert stays home, and so they're not, there's distance being created between them if it's not um, dealt with openly and well. So that is one thing. And then how we actually manage the conflict can look like different things. So we have power and control, and that's a high drama approach to dealing with these differences or dealing with conflict. We can certainly have differences, it's all in how we manage them. So power and control can look a few different ways. Negative reciprocity. So that can be like attack and counterattack between people. One person says something that's kind of mean or unkind, the other one does the same thing. One kind of withholds their affection or withholds communication, and the other one comes back at them with either more withholding or with bullying, name calling, humiliation, intimidation, manipulation, and deception. When these two, and it's just both people kind of either it kind of doing that, pulling apart, um, they're just reciprocating the negativity. Demand and withdraw pattern. This is by Gottman and Gottman. I've talked about this. This is even in my human development textbooks, been around as an idea for a long time. 4 stages of this. The first is being criticized. One party complains about something or criticizes something in the other one gets defensive about it and feels contempt for it and then withdraws either emotionally or physically. And that withdrawal is called stonewalling, where we withhold the attention and block communication so that we punish. Now, I think this can also look another way. If someone starts out rather than criticizing, withdrawing from communication or conflict, then we can kind of start later a little bit. So, one person, there's something that needs to be discussed, and they withdraw. They don't say anything. Then the other person might, say things or do things. The withdrawing person, wherever they are in this, whether they kind of start it or end it, can feel contempt for the other one if they don't feel able to be heard or to say what they need to. Human beings all want to be seen, known, and heard in earnest and with genuine compassion and concern. If that isn't taking part, if either person is not feeling seen, known, or heard, that person could end up feeling resentment and contempt for the other person, which can lead to withdrawal or can lead to the criticizing or whatever. So sometimes this demand and withdrawal can be one person just demanding something, demanding the person to talk, you've got to talk to me, and the other person just withdrawing. And so you end up with this tug of war between them. So this can be just one pattern of communication that creates high drama, whether it's inner drama through resentment and contentment and anger, or outward drama through yelling, criticizing, name calling, and those kinds of things. Whichever, it's not healthy, right? It doesn't, it creates more distance in the relationship. So these are just unhealthy forms of communication. Heavy control communication, which is going to happen in these kind of high drama things. 2 types talked about here. We have an iron fist and a velvet glove, and both are heavy control. The iron fist uses that strong language. It might be that name calling and humiliation, blaming, accusing, threatening, putting down, ordering, ridiculing, criticizing, taunting, sarcasm. Very orally aggressive um, about getting what they want, kind of a demand, to be heard, seen, or known. The velvet glove can be more passive aggressive, can be more passive but manipulative and controlling. And I think it's a little harder to kind of see ourselves sometimes in that and draw the line between when it's kind of using a velvet glove in terms of trying to navigate well and speak in a way that's going to be heard and truly being this. So it is a way of talking that will induce guilt. It can be whining, denying, withholding affection, pulling back, martyring ourselves. "Ah, see what you make me do. See how you make me feel. It's your fault that I'm having to work so hard. It's your fault, or look at everything I do for you. And what are you doing for me?" That's the kind of keeping score. Kind of, I know I said I would do this, but I'm just doing so much already. And it's very martyring and much more passive aggressive. It's not yelling, but it's still trying to manipulate things in kind of a quieter, more passive way, and doesn't usually help the relationship either. Just another thing that can happen inside of relationships that can cause drama is called triangulation. So there's two people in relationship and they're in conflict, and then somebody draws another one in. Now, an example that I read about was like a married couple gets in an argument about something, and one of them draws their father in to the argument, who then, as like savior, like they come in to try to save their child, and they create the child become their child is the victim, the other party is the persecutor, and they are the rescuer. But then what can tend to happen, shifts can become, and it's also perspective. So the one being persecuted feels victimized. Um, they feel like the victim being persecuted by the rescuer. Um, and then and then maybe the victim's trying to rescue one of them or the other, the original victim. So there's usually some kind of payoff involved, like if it is one of them bringing their like mother or father into the argument, then they get like support, they get emotional support, and they're feeling good. There tends to be kind of a payoff. They get to feel like they're right and so forth, and they don't have to manage it themselves. That can be a payoff. So oftentimes we do see payoff in the way that we incur payoff. We see payoff in others as they try to manage these kinds of conflicts and situation. The way that we do it, we have learned there's some type of reward. Even withdrawal can have a payoff of I just don't have to deal with it. I don't have to stand up. I don't, if that's something that scares us, I don't have to say hard words or had hard discussions. That's a payoff. I can pretend it's not going on. If I'm the person who likes to demand, there can be a payoff in being able to control other people. So we're always sort of maybe acting out of some sense of reward, like what's going to bring me the highest reward or payoff in this situation. So just some other things to consider. Responsibility in conflict. Externalizing responsibility means we put the responsibility outside of ourselves for everything, always blaming the other or someone else for what's going wrong. Where are we holding the responsibility for something? If we can take it off of ourselves, there's a payoff in that. I'm not responsible. I don't have to do anything. It's not my fault. Then I don't feel a need to take action that would be helpful to myself. Something called attributions, and this is how we explain other people's behavior. So I can't remember, it's been so long, if in one of the positive psychology things I did the walking the hallway scenario, where you see somebody coming towards you that you have positive feeling about, and they're walking toward you, and and you like are going to wave and smile, and they come up to you and they just have a straight face. They look at you and walk away. We will try to explain to ourselves why they did the way they did. We're always trying to explain and give stories. We're making up stories often because we really don't know the truth about why people do what they do. So there's two different, things we can think of here. Internal stable attributions. So if I'm saying it's the fault of the other person, an internal stable attribution will be that it's their character. They are just an all-around jerk. It is who they are as part of their personality and deep down essence. That I am giving it internal and stable, I'm making it internal and stable qualities of them and blaming them as a whole person for the way they're behaving. External unstable attributions are temporary and situational. Well, they had a bad day. It's not, sorry, it's not who they are that's defining what they're doing. It's that moment, and it's something situational that's causing them to behave in the way they're behaving. So we can use these on the flip side, even for positive behaviors. So an internal stable would be she's a good person. She does good things because she's a good person. That's about her essence and character. Or even like in unhappy characters, an external unstable, might look like, well, he's actually being nice today, or she must have woken up on the right side of the bed because, usually isn't. So we're giving their good behavior um, kind of external, unstable reasons if we're unhappy in the situation. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about is how do we tend to, what is our cognition around why people do the things that they do? What are the stories we make up about that? Now, it may be based on past behaviors of them. It may be have nothing to do with them and be on kind of the way we have um, created the stories in our head in general about ourselves and then projecting it onto what's going on within the relationship. Um, all right, but let's talk about the opposite side of all of this. So those are some high drama things that can cause high drama and then create further distance and further conflict, and things don't get resolved or repaired. In a healthy relationship, let me kind of say this. I can't stand that. For some reason, I always look frozen. Um, in good, secure relationships and attachment, there's always going to be disconnections and conflicts and things like that. And the key is always reparation. How do we repair a situation? How do we come back together and bridge the distance that has been created or the disconnection that has been there? So reparation is key. It's not about not having conflict or not having difficult times. Okay. So low drama reduces tension, leads to shared problem solving, and creates greater closeness. So similarities. Now, even if we have many things not in common and we're opposite in many ways, it would be more instead of focusing on the differences, but to actually, as a couple or as people, as friends, even to look for common ground, to look for ways that we're alike rather than different. Acknowledge and grow those places. What do you have in common? What are your shared interests? Can you spend more time doing those things together? Can you kind of, even if introvert, extrovert, and you do go your separate ways on occasion, can you make it like a standing date, an opportunity to spend time together doing something of shared interest? And we'll actually talk about different ways that can be managed, but and also to bridge those differences, seek empathy within ourselves, for ourselves and for other people, though. Look at nonverbal cues. Do they look stressed or relaxed? What emotions might they be feeling? Sad, mad, glad, or afraid? What do those look like? Do you know what those look like um, in that other person? And are you sensitive to them? And can you ask and be present to that? Practice active listening, paying attention to what is being shared, paraphrasing it back. So active listening is kind of a thing, and it's a big thing in counseling and therapy, is simply to listen while somebody speaks and then simply saying, well, what I heard you say is that you're not feeling like I'm spending enough time with you. And then is that right? That's kind of asking for feedback. And then the other person might say, yeah, that's feedback. That's positive feedback. There might also be an opportunity for clarifying, well, that's not really what I was trying to say. I was just saying that the times when we're together, you don't really seem to be present. So it can be giving each person an opportunity to clarify, to, making sure they feel like they're being listened to. One interesting activity I've done before in group situations is to kind of secretly make somebody so you make somebody a listener and somebody a speaker. You ask and you give them each kind of private things to do. And you ask the speaker, okay, I want you to talk about this. Choose one of these topics to talk about. You're going to talk about it for 2 minutes. And then the listener, what you kind of privately tell them to do, you don't want the speaker to know, is that their job is simply to listen, but to raise their hand, just simply quietly, silently, raise their hand every time they find themselves drifting off from what the speaker's saying, distracted by something else in the room, or finding themselves creating a response to the person rather than listening to the person. And you'd be amazed. It's a human condition, I think. It's a hard thing to learn to listen. And so it takes active effort and practice. So then there's also positive reciprocity, kind of the opposite of negative. Sharing positive acknowledgments and affects. So sharing positive emotion with somebody, saying something nice, giving them positive acknowledgments for things that they do and say and who they are. It's a way to show empathy to other people. So constructive influence is simply a different way of communicating and speaking to each other. That doesn't include games. No iron fist, no velvet fist. It's using what this McKay, Fanning, and Palig in their book Couple Skills, Making Your Relationship Work. They call it the 10 Commandments for Clean Communication, for expressing needs and wants. And it's kind of an organized way of speaking, but kind of get in our head of how we can very clearly state our position on something, especially if it's difficult for us. But it doesn't include games. It can be assertiveness. There's people that talk about just being assertive, but how? Because sometimes that can come out aggressive, and we don't want to cross that line. So there's going to be information that you can look at that gives you all 10 commandments. I'm not going to go through them all, but this whole clear message, making a whole clear message, includes two of the 10 commandments. So um, that's having a whole message and being clear. So you can look. I'm going to give you information that'll show you all 10. But here's what it means. So whole messages have four parts: observation, thoughts, feelings, need, and then needs, desires, and wants. So here's an example of a whole clear message. I notice you're pretty quiet tonight. That's the observation. It makes me think you're not interested in me. That's my thought about it. And I feel hurt and a little angry. Those are my feelings. I'd like for you to talk with me more. That's what I need. They're all very I messages, not you're being quiet and you're not listening to me and you're not understanding me. This is what I see, think, feel, and need. And so I'm taking responsibility for my own feelings and my own thoughts. It makes me think this. If somebody's active listening, then they might be able to say, well, can I clarify that? I am interested in you, or I have something else on my mind. It gives an open space. So I think if nothing else, I think the observation, thought, feeling, and need is a nice way to frame conversations that might be difficult for us. It also asks that we think about it before we just start blurting stuff out. How would we really frame that? We take responsibility, but we do get to say what it is that we're thinking, feeling, and wanting. So it also goes on, though, to say that in more transactional scenarios, that could be work. So the above might be better for like intimate relationships. Um, Assertive responses might be more effective in things that aren't quite as close. So say a dry cleaner that you picked up your shirt for. When I brought my shirt in for dry cleaning, it was new and in good condition. Now you can see it's discolored. I'm sorry. I don't think you need to say it twice. Now you can see it's discolored. I'd like to request a reimbursement for the cost of my shirt. You don't really get into your feelings. You get into the observation and the need. It's just a little more transactive. In work scenarios, some feeling words may create greater drama and could use some replacements. So you're looking for minimally effective response, the least threatening assertive response that can accomplish the objective. So rather than saying, I'm mad about what just happened, using I'm concerned about what just happened. It's not going to create as much high drama as concern. So this is a quote from it. In the workplace, the primary goal is to accomplish particular business objectives, rather than become more transparent to achieve emotional closeness, a goal more appropriate for intimate relationships. So we need to be at least thoughtful, mindful of words that we use. But I was even having a conversation with someone about relationships and something they were going to say to someone, and we're going to use like the words emotionally unstable. And I suggested a different kind of wording, maybe emotionally unpredictable, because we have to look for words that are going to, if we're looking really to poke at somebody, then we're creating high drama. We're not actually creating space for change to be made and good things to happen. So we have to look at what is our motivation really for what we're trying to do. and be mindful to that when we're doing it. Um, all right. I actually don't know how much more I have, and I was going to stop. All right, I'm going to pause for a moment. Three more slides, so I'm going to keep going. So sometimes negotiations are necessary with people, even in intimate relationships, if we're having trouble kind of working with just that listening and speaking. And it's a normal part of relationships. It's kind of something that we have to do. You know, if we use the clean communication, both parties express their wants, needs, and interests, not just us, not just one. Both maintain a flexible attitude. They use active listening, give feedback, and ask for clarification, search for similarities and common ground. Um, the goal of negotiating is to make and amend proposals that through compromise lead to a win-win. We really want everybody and the relationship to benefit from the communication. So some classic compromise solutions. Take turns. So if we're looking at the introvert extrovert, we'll go out this night, we'll stay in tomorrow night. We'll take turns with people, if we can't come to some sort of regular agreement, then we have to compromise. Do both and have it all. Um, so, we can take turns, we can go to the party, and then if I'll go to the party for an hour, and if I'm really feeling like I want to go home, you agree that we're going to kind of do that. We can have kind of a trial period, trying different things out. We can, do it a little bit differently. We can kind of split the difference between what you want and what I want. And they all sound a little bit the same, but we have to find ways to compromise and negotiate the situation. What's it going to look like? If I'm an introvert and you're an extrovert, how do I get to feeling like I'm being heard and getting a little bit of what I need? And, maybe I go home early. Maybe we take two cars. Maybe we only go to one party a month rather than three, or, something like that. We have to kind of um, hear both people and look for a solution. So responsibility is key to a low drama approach to relationship navigating. Relationship navigating is key to a low sorry, key to a low drama approach to relationship navigating is to accept responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. Others do not control what we think, feel, or do. We cannot control what others think, feel, or do. We can have a constructive influence, but we can't control. We are responsible for making changes that make us happy, not the other person. We are responsible for taking care of our needs. We must set limits of what we will and will not accept from others. So this is an important piece of this. Yes, it's important to take responsibility. I'm in this relationship. Relationships are kind of a dance between two people. And when we go into them, even this doesn't have to be romantic, it can be friendships. We go in with kind of roles that we accept, and kind of because we come in with whoever we are and all our stuff and how we are, and we kind of make a silent agreement about who's going to be what in this relationship. And so that doesn't always end up working for the long term, because one person wants those dance steps to change, especially if they have been sort of out of power. And then the one in power doesn't necessarily, if that's kind of, if it's a control kind of thing, doesn't want it to change. So we do have to know that um, we have to set limits on what we'll accept from other people. And I know that this can sometimes be hard, because we can feel like we really love someone or we really care about someone, and then they kind of go outside of those bounds and we'll make excuses for or whatever. But for ourselves, we have to know that we are always either choosing to adapt to a situation, we're trying to shape a situation, or these are things we can always do when it comes to difficult situations. We can just adapt and see how we can make ourselves fit into it. We can shape it and try to see if we can shift it and change it in some way, or we can get out of it. And I'm not saying any of those are ever always easy. It's just that we have to be willing to say that there are, choices if we look closely enough and we ask for enough help and we get some social support. It is okay to say no to people. Really hard. I had a friend once who said to me, I think it's important that we know we can say no and not even have a reason. We don't have to give excuses for saying no. Sometimes we just say no. We have the right to be treated with respect, to call attention to our feelings, and ask disrespectful behavior to stop. So it's really hard to build up those things. And that's why I really think that things like mindfulness and all of these practices we're talking about, as they build our capacity to manage stress, they also build our inner strength and our ability to have agency and speak for ourselves to some extent. And I think that that is extremely important. Here's just a couple of scenarios to kind of play with and consider. Your partner says to you, "We just don't seem to click anymore. Maybe we are just not a good long term match." What is a whole clear message to express your thoughts and feelings? Your boss makes a comment about you in front of coworkers that you feel is disparaging and disrespectful. You feel embarrassed, hurt, and angry. What minimally effective response could you use to try to prevent this from happening again? Answer one of these. I'll give you 3 points of extra credit if you email it to me. Okay. So those are just some things to think about, ways to practice this. We have to find small ways to practice as we work up to bigger ways to walk in and step into these things. All right, so I hope you have found some of this kind of discussion helpful or interesting at least, and I'll see you next time.